From heat waves to thunderstorms, there are changes on the way for the UK's weather. What's it looking like for the weekend? How frequently can we expect days like these, hot days, to occur in the future? All of this is going to be covered in today's deep dive. Welcome along. I'm Annie. I'm a presenter and meteorologist here at the Met Office, and later on I'll be joined by our special guest Mike Kendon to take a closer look at the state of the UK climate report. But before then, we'll take a closer look at the UK's weather this week, and also we'll take a little look into next week as well. So at the moment, across this week, across the UK, we have had some frontal systems across northern areas. It's actually been a pretty cloudy start to the week across the north, but elsewhere in central and southern areas, it's been a sunny week and it is really hotting up. It's likely to be the hottest day of the year so far today, if not tomorrow. So you can see on the satellite picture from the past few days, frontal systems have moved into the far northwest, but they're starting to fizzle away. And I think more in the way of widespread sunshine will spread across the country throughout the rest of the week. And that is because we've got high pressure dominating our weather. And not only do we have high pressure, we've also got warm air as well. This is the air mass and the pressure sequence across the UK. So let's play the sequence, and you can see as high pressure builds in across the UK through Tuesday, through this evening, and it will dominate into Wednesday. But as I said, there is a change on the way through Wednesday evening and into Thursday. Thunderstorms are afoot across southern areas. This frontal system here across the southern areas of England, southeast of England in particular, bring a threat from Wednesday afternoon. We do have warnings in force. We'll take a closer look at them in just a minute. And we continue to see these features, these little areas. This just shows areas of forcing. It's forcing from upper levels. That means that we could see some thunderstorms, potentially some really heavy downpours through Wednesday and Thursday, lasting maybe into Friday morning before we see a change, another change into the weekend. And that's because we start to see low pressure dominating, actually quite a big area of low pressure that will then stick with us throughout the weekend and into the start of next week as well. You can see the air mass here. It shows we've got cooler air. We put the wind arrows on. The air's coming in and around from the north. It's going to be a much fresher direction. We're losing that continental heat, losing that humidity through the weekend. So if you're not a fan of the heat, it's probably only going to last until at least Saturday. Southeastern areas may hold on to it a little longer, but across northern areas or many western areas, it's going to turn much fresher from Friday afternoon onwards. But that also means it will probably turn wetter and windier as well. So before we see that change, the temperatures are going to rise overnight and into the day as well. The daytime temperatures will vary from place to place because it all depends on cloud cover, where we're going to see those thunderstorms as well. Let's have a look at where our maximum temperatures are going to be through the next few days. And then we will have a look at the thunderstorm risk and the warnings. So this is today, 32 degrees, the maximum expected temperature across southeast. That's the maximum temperature that we're expecting in the UK. But widely, if you look at the gradient, it's really much of England and Wales experiencing this heat. Across parts of eastern Scotland, temperatures are into the low 20s, still warmer than it has been earlier on in the week, but across the west of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, still a little bit fresher here, even North Wales as well. So it's not everywhere that we're seeing this heat. If you live in the north, you're probably thinking, what is all the fuss about? And actually it's going to be quite pleasant for the rest of the week for these areas. But where the heat really builds through today and into tomorrow, that's when we start to see the threat of a thundery breakdown. So how do the temperatures change into tomorrow? Well, you can see on the gradient, it's still England and Wales seeing the highest temperatures. You also see the heat building across parts of Europe as well. The Olympic Games going to be hot and possibly thundery through the next few days. The heat does spread up to parts of Scotland as well later on Wednesday. Again, we could see temperatures into the 30s on Wednesday, but it's starting, because we've got this threat of thunderstorms from Wednesday, that's when we're starting to see a little less confidence in the highest temperatures, but still very good confidence that we'll see temperatures quite widely in the high 20s. How does that compare to average? So this is today. So you can see this is compared to the average for this month, so July's average. Of course, we're at the end of July now, but the difference between July and August average is quite little, is fairly minimal. So highest temperatures, greater than average temperatures across southern areas of England in particular. Oh, it's changing by itself there. Tomorrow, quite widely across central areas of England, across parts of Dorset and the south coast, we could see into parts of Hampshire. That's where we could see the highest temperatures tomorrow, into the low 30s, but widely into Wales, northern England as well. And you can start to see across Scotland there are some specks of temperatures above average here, but around much of Northern Ireland, eastern areas of northern areas of the UK, just around average for the time of year. But I think there's still going to be quite a lot of sunshine around. So into Thursday, yes, the heat is starting to subside a bit more. That's because we've got a greater confidence of those showers breaking out, and so there'll be more in the way of cloud through Thursday. But still, we're above average on those temperatures. Temperatures still in the 20s, high 20s. And then Friday, again, we're still holding on to this warm air. We've not got that fresher air coming in until Friday evening. So particularly across eastern areas, we're seeing temperatures above average. And then finally, Saturday, what a change it is to Saturday. Blues on the map. So if you're not enjoying this heat, as I said, Saturday, it should get that much fresher, but I think the humidity will stick around. Temperatures will drop away. Definitely. So as I said, there is a risk of thunderstorms throughout the week. Let's have a closer look at that. So it's best if we have a look at the rainfall for the week. Now, before I show you this, know that with thunderstorms, if you don't know this already, and showers, how they start to develop and how they come out on the graphics needs to be taken with a little bit of a pinch of salt, especially if you're looking further ahead. So this is going to give us a good idea of where the risk of seeing those showers and heavy thunderstorms is. So through Tuesday, we put the cloud on as well, and you can just see how bright it is and clear it is overnight. So through this evening, still fairly clear, but then as you start to see these sparks coming up from the south, this is what we called mid-level instability, and it may come and clip parts of the south coast throughout Wednesday afternoon onwards. Now this is where we've got quite a lot of uncertainty in exactly whether we're going to see any impacts from that rainfall. Now we have issued a rainfall warning for Wednesday afternoon. This is the warning here, so it's across parts of, let's zoom in instead of zoom out. No, that's just giving you a closer look at the warning for Thursday. But this is where we've got the warning for Wednesday at the moment. It's a thunderstorm warning, and it's valid from, that's why it's going backwards. There we go. And it's valid from midday on Wednesday throughout Wednesday afternoon and up until midnight. So it's from Wednesday afternoon when we start to see that threat. As I said, there is lower confidence in this, but this is the area where we've got the potential for some thunderstorms. Now, if you don't see any thunderstorms, what you might see is a particular type of cloud which shows we've got that mid-level instability. I mentioned that a minute ago. So mid-level instability is when we have instability in our atmosphere that allows heavy showers to break out, thunderstorms, but it's from the middle level. So you may not see things reach the ground. You may not see any rainfall from any of this instability reach the ground, but you could see some lightning. Now, what a clear indication of that mid-level instability is this type of cloud. So I don't know if you know what this is, but this is Altocumulus castellanus. It's named after Castellanus because of its turret-like shape. So you see this sort of turret starting to develop. It's altocumulus, so it's a mid-level cloud higher up in the troposphere. In our atmosphere, and you start to see it's just that instability, so you get the clouds bubbling away, and you can get lightning from these clouds but see no rain from them. So if you're along the south coast in that warning area, yes, there is a risk of thunderstorms breaking out. That's why we've got that thunderstorm warning, but there is also a risk. You could also just see some of that altocumulus cloud bubbling up and perhaps a bit of a lightning show. So definitely keep up to date with the forecast throughout the day for Wednesday. Now into Thursday, we get a bit more confidence on the risk of thunderstorms. There's a few things that happen through Thursday. So let's go back to Wednesday. So this is Wednesday evening. That's when we're getting this sort of mid-level instability coming up from the near continent. It could bring a threat of thunderstorms. And then it becomes a bit more of a feature as it spreads up. As it spreads up into parts of East Anglia and southeastern areas of England, and that threat kind of increases as it comes closer to the UK, and we could see some heavier thunderstorms from there. There's also another feature as well that starts life over across parts of Wales. So this is Wednesday evening, starts across parts of Wales and then spreads into northeastern areas of England. Now, those are, at the moment, two fairly distinct areas where we could see some heavy rainfall. If we look at the rainfall totals for 12 hours. If we look at the rainfall totals, there's some spots in these areas where we can see 25 millimetres of rainfall. That could fall in quite a short period of time. And if you see any of those showers falling in the same places, because they could come quite focused in some places, they bring a threat of some flooding issues. Obviously, we've got lightning as a risk with thunderstorms. There's a potential for some quite large hail as well. We could see hail of 4 centimetres in diameter, which is pretty large for the UK, and so as a result we have got a thunderstorm warning in force. As I said, it's at the moment models are showing two different areas, parts of southeast and parts of northeastern England, but the warning, because of that uncertainty, means that we've encompassed a larger area than that. That's paused. And we've encompassed a larger area, sorry, it keeps changing, so I just don't want it to change again. A larger area than that that spreads into parts of Wales as well as southern areas of England as well. But I think through Thursday morning, it's most likely across eastern areas. And then there's a third, the risk of thunderstorms that develops as well. There's a lot to focus on, which is the brilliance of the deep dive. Gives me the opportunity to show you a bit more information about this when we've got a bit more time. So Thursday, it's a feature more than anything. It's forced by something in the upper atmosphere, creating these areas where we could see this risk of thunderstorms. And then once that area clears out the way, we then can get showers breaking out from the daytime heating of the ground. That's when you get those cumulus clouds that bubble up and get bigger and bigger to towering cumulus and then cumulonimbus clouds as well. And that's what these showers are from, and that's where we've got the risk of thunderstorms. So that larger thunderstorm warning is associated with both that feature that came through on Thursday morning, this feature here, and then that's going to be closely followed by this risk of showers. Now, these showers could break out here, there and everywhere, to be honest. Most likely where we get the peak of the heat through Thursday morning or Thursday lunchtime. So it does kind of depend how quickly that feature moves away, because there will be some cloud associated with the Wednesday night feature. So you've got this cloud. When you hold on to the cloud through the day, that just means the temperatures won't get quite as high, so we may not get the showers breaking out as widely across eastern areas. So it's most likely further west across parts of southern England, South Wales, where we could see those thunderstorms into Thursday afternoon. But we've got a big warning area for the whole of Thursday at the moment. So stay tuned for more details on that. If you've got any questions about thunderstorms, then make sure you just leave your comments and we'll be having a look at them later on in the day. So as I said, there is a change on the way for the weekend. We've got low pressure returning after the brief interlude of the summer burst. As I said, it's not entirely widespread, this heat, but I think a lot of us will get away with some dry and pleasant weather. And then we see this change into the weekend. Low pressure dominating by Friday, and temperatures returning much closer to average from Friday, and actually getting much fresher on Saturday. So a notably colder day to come on Saturday. Low pressure dominating. Actually could be, that's the jet stream, it's not going to be quite as windy as that, but it could be quite windy with this low pressure system up to the north and west of the UK through Saturday. How does that change through the weekend? So we're expecting this weather front to sweep through, introducing that fresher air a bit more widely across the UK. But there is some uncertainty on the timings of this weather front. It may develop a wave on it, meaning the rain might linger a bit more in the southeast through Sunday morning as well. And then, but once it does clear, we get a bit of a ridge building in, but then there's the next frontal system coming in from the south and west. From the south and west, bringing with it more rain. It's this low pressure system. It really develops into quite a big system and sticks with us through much of the week. And that's the trend through next week, is for low pressure to dominate, but sat up to the north of the UK. And so what that means is that wetter weather's more likely across northern areas, western areas, dry weather across the south and east. It's very often the case in the UK's weather. Westerlies are our dominant wind direction. So kind of typical summery weather throughout next week and into the weekend is expected. So that low pressure is expected to dominate through much of the week. This is the most likely pressure pattern. This is for Tuesday, Tuesday the 6th of August. And if you look at these, I was having a look at these earlier, they all look the same through much of the week. This low pressure just moving gradually eastwards across the country. Most of these fronts will likely clear to the east through the southeast quite quickly, but because the rain may become what we call aligned with the wind direction, that can make them stick around for longer, and that's when we get those wiggles and waves on weather fronts, and that's when you can get the rainfall totals really pepping up. So there is the potential for some heavier rain still in the southeast, but I think most frequent wet and windy weather, north and western areas. Most frequent dry and brighter weather through next week's south and eastern areas. And that's quite clear in the anomalies map for the rainfall. This is for the whole week from the 5th of August to the 12th of August. So wetter than average weather across western areas. It's not significantly wetter than average, but if you looked at this map for this week, they're all brown, showing the drier than average. So it's definitely going to be a different week next week, but kind of around average, which will probably be quite pleasant really most of the time across eastern areas, including eastern areas of Scotland, parts of eastern northern England as well. So it's not just the southeast that will see any nice weather through next week. And the temperatures will also be impacted by that, because with that low pressure in that position, that brings us northwesterlies, westerlies, none of those southerlies that we're seeing at the moment, that introduces that milder air. So likely will be temperatures around average. You can see the blues on the map here show below average temperatures across the northwest when we see that more frequent wetter and windier weather. But still across eastern areas, potential for some warmer than average weather. So whenever the sun does shine, will be in August. By that point, it's still pretty nice. So I think it's not going to be as unsettled as it has been for a lot of this summer through next week, but certainly not as settled and dry and sunny as we're seeing, or as hot even as we're seeing this week. So it has definitely is a hot week this week. We've seen quite cool weather so far this summer. There's been brief interludes of summer, but when the temperatures really ramp up, they ramp up quite quickly in the UK. And what I wanted to talk about next, as I mentioned earlier, was the state of the UK climate report. Now, this is a report that we've put together here at the Met Office with some of our partners. It is a huge report. You can find the full report online, but today I just wanted to go over a few details in it to pick out some key pieces of information. And joining me in the studio today is Senior Scientist here at the Met Office, Mike Kendon. Hi,
hello,
Mike.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Hello, good, thank you.
Good. So you are an expert in the UK State of the Climate report. First of all, maybe just give us a bit more detail about what the report involves, a bit of background on it.
Sure, yeah, okay. Well, there's a lot of information about this report. Basically, it's a summary of what the observations from the network of weather stations around the UK are telling us about our climate and how it is changing. So we have a network of about 250 automatic weather stations around the UK, and another 100 or 150 or so manual weather stations which are read daily. And we have observations from these stations that go back actually historically all the way back to the 19th century, and they tell us very clearly that our climate is changing. It is changing right now. So the report is looking at year 2023, what happened in 2023 in the context of these long-term climate records going back. And as well as looking at 2023, we also look at the most recent decade, 2014 to 2023, because that provides us with, if you like, a snapshot of where our climate is at right now.
So it takes a look at 2023 as a whole. And what are some of the key events that, for those that can't quite remember last year, let alone yesterday, what are some of the key events that we had in the UK in 2023?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing to say, of course, is that it was another very warm year overall. So it was actually the second warmest year on record for the UK, behind the warmest year, which was 2022, the previous year. And when we look at the statistics overall for this annual temperature series for the UK from 1884, the most recent 10 years is the warmest 10-year period in the whole record, and it includes 6 of the 10 warmest years. So we're seeing a lot more extremes in temperature in our climate than we did in the past. And in fact, we had 4 months of the year were in the top 10 warmest months. Which were February, May, June and September.
June was a particularly notable month, wasn't it?
That was
the very hot start to the summer.
June was exceptionally warm. It really, really was very, very warm indeed. It actually smashed previous records for June. And actually one of the contributing factors to that was a marine heat wave, which is estimated, studies have estimated that raised the UK temperature by around about 0.6 of a degree. So that obviously lifted it further. But yes, it was absolutely a record warm June.
And so the report looks at key events from the past year. It looks at so many different things. Such a long report. I was having a flick through earlier, but there are also some key findings of how we then put that data into context with our changing climate, as you said. And so what are those key findings that have come out of this year's report? Sure.
Well, so one of the key things is if we look at temperature extremes.
Yeah.
So in particular, if we look at the number of days that are exceeding temperature thresholds of 20, 25, 28, 30 or 32 degrees. So we could show a map of that if
we've got some of those prepared. So yeah, you said you looked at a few different thresholds, but 28, yes. We're using 28 degrees yes. in the map here. Okay, so what does this one show then?
Okay, so this is showing us for the period 1961-1990, how many days on average for each of these regions see somewhere in that region exceeding 28 degrees. So we can regard that as, if you like, a hot day.
Yeah.
And so you can see the scale of this map goes up to 20 days, and you can see climatologically, so the warmest areas of the UK are in the south and the southeast.
Yeah.
So this is 1961 to 1990. But if we look at the most recent decade, can you see how the reds have really, really dramatically expanded across that map? So in this report, we summarise statistics which look at the most recent decade. And we look at a number of these thresholds. So we look at 20 degrees, which we've described as pleasant, 25 degrees, which we've described as warm days, and 28 as hot days, 30 and 32 degrees, which would be extremely hot days, very hot and extremely hot days. What is really interesting is these are all increasing, but whereas when we look at the most recent decade compared to 1961-90, the number of pleasant days has increased by about 40%, and the number of warm days has increased by about 60%. The number of hot days has doubled, and the number of very hot and extremely hot days has actually trebled. Wow. So we're seeing a disproportionately greater increase for the higher temperatures, the more extremes of temperature.
Of the extremes.
And of course, yes, absolutely. And of course, it's those that are of most significance, really, when you think about impacts on public health.
Yeah.
So, you know, the fact that these extremes are changing so fast is really of concern.
Yeah, definitely. And that is a major piece that's come out of the report. So that's kind of showing the daily extremes, I suppose. How does it fit in with sort of seasonal or annual records, and how are those changing?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've also looked at that as well. So
we've got
if
a
we
map.
look at a,
Is it this one?
yeah, it's
Yeah,
that
there you
one.
are.
So if we look at another couple of figures in the report, there's lots of figures in the report. I can only show a couple really.
Yeah.
But just to look at this is looking at by decade the number of occurrences that are in the top 10 warmest of monthly, seasonal, and annual temperature series for counties of the UK. We've got like 97 county areas of the UK,
Yeah.
and we're summing them up. So we have monthly top 10 occurrences in blue, seasonal in orange, and annual in green. And this is looking at the top 10 warmest and the top 10 coldest.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we'd say is if our climate was what we'd call stationary, so if it wasn't changing, we'd broadly expect these bars to be a similar height across here.
And they are for a lot of, actually,
They are, yes,
beginning.
but what's happened is actually they are overwhelmingly occurring towards the far end of the series.
Yeah.
So climate change is dramatically increasing the chance of us having a record warm month or, you know, a top 10 warmest month, season or year. So we're actually at the point now where around about 1 in 4 months, 1 in 3 seasons, and every other year is falling in the top 10 warmest of our series.
Wow.
So that's what we're seeing based on the observations. And the flip side of that is, of course, the other way around with cold temperature records. These are absolutely disappearing. So the last record cold month that we had for the UK was December 2010. Since then, we've had a large number of we've had a significant number of record months since then. So we're seeing dramatic changes in these records as well as a result of our climate changing. And we know why these are happening. Studies have shown that if we look at the year overall, 2023, the chance of a year occurring like that as a result of climate change has increased by around about a factor of 150. We know that the record warm June that we had, and we had a really notable heat wave in September as well.
Yes, of course.
People might remember we had a run
it was 30 degrees for 7 days in a row. We'd never had that
7
before.
days in a row.
Yeah.
7 days in a row. That's the first time that's happened. So all of these things, studies have shown that they're more likely as a result of the fact that our climate is changing.
Yeah, this is such a stark. You can just see it so obvious on there, and I think it makes it's even more notable when we have the colder than average, to be honest, or disappointing starts to the summer that we've had so far. Obviously, there's a bit of a change to that at the moment, but it becomes more notable because our expectations are changing because our climate's changing. Yeah,
that's a really good point, I think. So when we look at our climate and we're looking at our statistics, we're generally monitoring those against a 30-year baseline period. So that baseline period is, it follows World Meteorological Organization guidelines, and we use 1991-2020 as the most recent 30-year period, and 1961-1990 as kind of a baseline reference period. But what's really interesting is that 30 years is also roughly one human generation. I mean, actually, my own family, a generation is more like 40 years, if not more. But that's typically a human one generation. So what we're talking about is generational changes in our climate. So what, for example, my father would have regarded as a normal climate when he was my age, what my children will regard as a normal climate when they reach my age.
Yes,
so
I guess that's why we
change.
also, the perspective of the perception rather of the weather is really changing. You can see between different generations of what people have experienced. Like the summer of 1976 is one that sticks out for lots of people.
Yes, absolutely, and that was still a really, really exceptional summer. Actually, looking at the previous graphic we showed, which is looking at the number of days exceeding thresholds, actually 1976 was exceptional really for the persistence of the heat that year, the number of days exceeding 30 degrees. But actually the highest temperature that year, around about 35, was not exceptional in the context of the current climate. You've got to remember that only the previous year, 2022, we had 40 degrees in the UK for the first time. And we saw some stations with very long running records, like places like Durham and Sheffield and so on, well over a century of records where they're breaking an all-time temperature record, by a margin of 3 or even 4 degrees, so quite extraordinary. So our climate is really changing. And just to go back to the generational thing, we do have another figure.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, so you're saying it's changed from your father to you,
yes,
and then now
yes,
for your
right.
children. Like,
yes.
what should people be expecting for the future?
Well, there's a key point, isn't it? And I mean, one of the things that one of the key pieces of work done here in the Hadley Centre in the Met Office is running climate projections using high-resolution climate models, running out to the future to try to understand how climate change is going to play out. So what this graph shows is UK annual mean temperature, and we're looking at the observations in blue from 1884 to 2023, and then beyond that, beyond that,
I'll get it. There we are.
Beyond that, we have this plume of a range of outcomes heading towards the end of the century, depending on, so that depends on how much more we emit in terms of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere in the future. And you can see there's a range of possibilities with this. But what you can see, really, the key thing to see is that how much this increases going into the future. So we have this record that goes back to 1884, so it's more than a century. And generally speaking, fluctuations have been within about a half a degree of the average over that period. I mean, in fact, we have an even longer series called Central England temperature, which goes back 3 centuries, and fluctuations within that. In the annual mean temperature, Central England temperature within about a half a degree over that period.
Yeah. What
we're now looking at, going out to the end of the century, is under what we described as a medium emission scenario. So this is one of the different scenarios being looked at.
Yeah.
A year like 2023, by the middle of the century, it will be considered a fairly average year, and by the end of the century, that will be considered a cool year. And remember that this, at the moment, is the second warmest year on record. And actually, studies have shown that even in the current climate, there's potential for a year that's to be much warmer than year 2023. So a generational change is, if you think about a generational change being, 2 of the grid line spacings on this chart, say, or something like that, we're seeing these dramatic changes in a relatively short space of time in our climate.
Yeah, and I think you can see the line. It sort of goes up and down. This is key for temperature, isn't it?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
It's the trends and how you're more likely to have those warmer years or warmer months or record-breaking events, but you're still going to have that variation in our climate. So you're still going to have those cooler months and so we're going to continue to have that variation in the future, aren't we? But it's the warmer things that become more likely.
So there's these 2 things playing out. There's the large variability that we all know in our climate, that we all know about, and there's also climate change. And it's these 2 things happening together. And effectively, it's basically climate change is kind of weighing the dice, if you like. So the chance of getting a record warm month or season or year or a really significant heat wave is greatly increased as a result of our changing climate, whereas the chance of getting a cold spell is reduced. Now, that's not to say we won't still get some spells of severe winter weather, but they tend to be much less frequent than in the past.
Yeah.
So, for example, I remember when I was a child, some quite lengthy spells with snow on the ground for a couple of weeks at the time in Leicestershire in the 1980s, for example. Temperatures falling to minus 20 in quite a few years.
Yeah.
During that time, those are very much more unusual now than in the past.
Definitely. Mike, it has been so interesting to cover a bit more about the report. Thank you so much for taking the time for joining us. And thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed today's deep dive. If you've got any questions about the State of the Climate report from 2023 or anything about the weather for the next few days, what we can expect for the upcoming heat or the heat we're already seeing, then make sure you leave some comments. I'll be around to answer your comments throughout the rest of the day. But thank you again, Pleasure. Mike. Thank you very much for joining us, and I'll see you again soon.